Cup and cone bearings. Believe it or not, they're not actually a thing of old because there are a lot of high-end wheel sets and hubs that still come fitted with that type of bearing. Now their competitor, the cartridge bearing, once they wear out, you just simply remove them and fit them using a specialist tool. However, the cup and cone bearing, that can be adjusted nice and easily using some pretty basic tools in fact. So today, we're going to adjust one of my old wheels that I had kicking around. How does a cup and cone hub work then? Well, you've got here, this is a cone which threads onto the axle of the hub. Now, as you can see on the inside here of the cone, you've got some really polished, hardened surfaces. Now, when you thread that onto the axle, it actually meets up against the ball bearings that are inside of the hub shell. And then inside of the hub shell, you have a race. Now the race is kind of a reverse of the cone. So it's a very similar surface on the inside of the hub shell that the balls are sandwiched in between. So those ball bearings are rotating around them. Now the amount of pressure or tension that you tighten the cone onto the axle determines how smooth or how badly that wheel is going to roll. So this is where we're now going to tackle that adjustment of the cones. So in order to adjust and remove the play from the cones on the hub, we're going to need a couple of tools. First up, one of these, which is a cone spanner. They do come in different sizes depending on the size of the actual flat on your cone that you're going to adjust. And then also an adjustable spanner or a spanner like this to actually tighten the lock nut against the cone to actually finalise that adjustment. Then also another bit of kit which I really do recommend, but I do appreciate that not everybody out there has a vise, is an axle vise which slots on top or inside of your current vise setup. Purpose behind it is that it holds the axle nice and tight, as well as not allowing the wheel to move around at all, therefore allowing you to really adjust those cones perfectly to get them nice and smooth again. So let's tackle this old wheel then that I've had kicking around for ages and loaned to someone, and it returned in, well, a not very good condition. So, as you can see, the actual axle here has become a little bit loose. I have been told that they didn't ride it once this happened and they've left it tucked away in their shed before giving it back to me. So, the best way of checking this without removing a wheel from a bike is with the quick release skewer or the nuts of the wheel done up nice and tight. Try and actually move the wheel around. If there's any knocking at all, it means you are going to need to adjust those cones. Don't confuse any movement in the rim with wheel flex, because nearly every wheel out there, you are going to be able to move slightly. It's when it's knocking or tapping or any real stiff or looseness down here at the actual hub itself. Now, if you do have any knocking or play, that kind of thing, don't ride anymore for the moment, because in doing so, you could in fact damage the hub shell and in turn render the parts totally and utterly useless, because the bearings can essentially start pitting against the cones and therefore damaging the hub shell, the cones, and well, leaving you out of pocket and having to buy a new hub. So today we're going to just remove a little bit of play. Now at this point it doesn't really matter which side you're going to tackle first, providing of course you've got the same amount of axle showing on either side. If you have a lot more axle showing on one side than the other, then you're going to need to adjust that side first, the side with less axle showing, because ideally you want to have the same number of threads showing on either side. Therefore the wheel is going to remain equal distance from either side of your chainstays or your fork blades when it's installed. So in this case, they are pretty much spot on. I can see that this side has slightly fewer threads, or possibly half a thread less than on that side. So I'm actually just going to wind in these cones. So I'm going to put it into the axle vise. Now I've got the wheel inside of the axle vise, it is going to make this job a lot easier. When I was a lot younger, it was pretty difficult to actually do it without one of these vices, because you would try and rest it on your knees or in between your legs and try and do the spanners, and ultimately things just wouldn't really work. So if you can buy one, do. I can't recommend them enough. Let's crack on then with the actual nitty-gritty of adjustment. As you can see, the cone spanner, it is really flat, and the reason being is because the flats of the actual cone are so narrow indeed, so you can't use a traditional spanner to get in there. So I'm going to put it in there and just hold that in place, and then with your standard spanner or adjustable wrench, just put it over the lock nut. At this point, you kind of want to hold the cone spanner in place and then work the other spanner in an anti-clockwise direction. So just freeing that up because they have previously been tightened towards one another to hold them in place. Once you've done that, you are able to really assess how much movement there is in there and essentially take up any slack with the cone spanner. So we're just going to turn that a small amount, and normally you can just pick up the hub and feel any movement there. So it does require a little bit more. At this point, it's almost a game of a little bit tighter, a little bit looser, tighter, looser, until you find that ultimate balance in no friction, or little friction rather. The wheel's spinning nice and smoothly, there's no gritty feeling. If you like, hold onto the axle just and feel, because your hands can really sense vibrations very well. And once you've found that sweet spot, you're going to want to hold that cone in place really, really precisely. Just tighten up that lock nut by hand and then do the finishing touch. At this point, you really don't want that cone spanner to move, because if it does, all that hard work of adjustment you've just done is going to go out the window. We don't want that. Now, I do appreciate if this is the first time you've ever tackled it, it can take quite a while to get it absolutely spot on, because those cones, they do require just tiny little bits of movement to get them spot on. However, if you do want to prolong the life of your hub, it's certainly worth investing the time in that. Now, for instance, if you were going to tackle your rear wheel and it was the locking nut and cone on the drive side that was the problematic area, you are likely to need to remove either the freewheel or cassette to be able to work on those components correctly. So just bear that in mind. Now, in the coming weeks, I do hope to actually be able to show you a full rebuild and re-grease of one of these hubs on a little project that I've got going on. So do stay tuned for that. And as ever, give this video a like, a share, a thumbs up, share it with a mate of yours who's rolling on some of these cup and cone bearings. Don't forget to check out the GCN shop at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com, where we have a whole heap of goodies, including, get this, a GCN pizza cutter. How cool is that? And now, for another great video, how about clicking just down here?